So you remember we did all those drop 2 voicings on the top 4 strings? Well, now we're going to take the same concept and slide it over into the middle 4 strings. And what happens is, because of the tuning of the 2nd and 3rd string, we're going to have a bunch of different shapes. Wouldn't it be nice if the guitar was pitched all in 4ths? If it was, you could take all the shapes that you learned on the top 4 strings, put them on the middle 4 strings, put them on the bottom 4 strings, and you wouldn't have to learn 59,000 different chord shapes. Unfortunately, that's not the way the guitar works, and so because of that different tuning of the 2nd and 3rd string, we have to relearn a whole bunch of different shapes on the middle 4 strings. I've given it to you in the key of B flat, as opposed to the C that you by now are used to hearing me do, because B flat now puts us in the 1st position on the guitar. So let's start with B flat 7. And the only reason I start with dominant 7 instead of major 7 is because we see dominant 7 so much in so much music. It's the most used chord of all, so you might as well start with the most used chord and then work from there. So here's B flat dominant 7, root position, 3rd on top. Aha, think about that for a moment. When we did drop 2s on the top 4 strings, he was focusing on the top string, and he didn't really mention the inversion. Now he's saying root position. Does that mean he's changed his mind? Yes, he has. He's now saying that since we are now closing in on the bass register of the guitar, we do have to pay attention to the bottom note of the chord as well as the top note of the chord. So we have B flat 7, root in the bass, 3rd on top. 1st inversion, 3rd in the bass, 5th on top. 5th in the bass, flat 7 on top. 3rd inversion, flat 7 in the bass, root on top. And then, just like we've done before, you go through the different inversions. And if I go to major 7, minor 7, minor 7 flat 5, and again those 4 chord types before all the others, because those are the chords that create the major diatonic chord sequence. And you're just going to see them all the time. I've got some great names for these chords. You remember the sparkly chord? It's here. Here's major 7, 1st inversion. There's that same half step in the middle. But somehow this doesn't sound quite as sparkly as it did when it was on the top 4 strings. Remember this one? That one really rings. This one has a ring, but because it's a little deeper sounding, it doesn't have quite the same ring. But it's still the sparkly chord. And you notice that because of the tuning of the strings, we have a little bit more of a stretch now. That's quite a stretch between these 2 fingers, but certainly doable. Let's go to the next major 7 chord, which is this one. If you play it with 4 fingers, that's what you get. Now the gap between these 2 fingers, if I keep doing this, I'm eventually going to get tendinitis. This is not a great gap to have between these 2 fingers. So there are several solutions to this. One is to play the 4 strings with 3 fingers. Now to do this, you have to have the ability to play 2 strings with 1 finger without blocking the next string. Easier said than done. The idea is to keep this finger upright so that it doesn't block out that extra string. You get your 4 notes, but you're not having that awkward stretch that you had before. And if you look at your finger once you've tried to do this, you should see 2 string indentations on the tip of your finger. It's using the fat part of your finger in between the 2 strings. Then we get to the last major 7 chord. And do you recognize that this is our bad chord again? The root on top of the major 7. Anytime you have the root above the major 7 by an octave, you're going to have what's called a flat 9 interval. We had it on the top 4 strings. We've got it now in the middle 4 strings. It's not a great sound, Occasionally there might be a situation that you might use it, somebody might like it, you might be looking for a particular dissonance. But in general use, not a very usable chord. What you can do, as we did before, is take this major 7 and lower it down a whole step. And now we have B flat major 6 instead of major 7, a viable substitute for major 7. You might also recognize that this is one of our infamous minor 7 chords that you've probably been playing since you were 12 years old. So this is simply taking the major 7 chord, lowering it, the 7th down a whole step to 6, we now have major 6. That's a substitute. You can also, as we did on the top 4 strings, lower this note, which happens to be the 3rd, down a whole step. And now we have 6, 9, and what else do you notice? There's our voicing in fourths again. So when we play one of the substitutes for a major 7 with the root on top, we're playing voicing in fourths. Coming back down, the sparkly chord, and there's your standard major 7 chord. With dominant 7th, I don't really have any great names for any of these except for this one. If you look carefully at the shape of this one, it looks somewhat like a diamond. This is one of the diamond chords. There are actually 2 diamond chords, and we'll get into the other one later, but this one is a dominant 7th chord with the root on top. The flat 7 is in the bass, 3rd inversion, and you look somewhat like an awkward diamond, but certainly it does have the shape of a diamond there. Minor 7. Here's one. This is 1st inversion minor 7. And you look at this, and you could think about this one the same way as that major 7 we were talking about. This is kind of a tendinitis chord too, but there's no solution for this one other than to just play it. But if you notice, there's something familiar about this chord. Star Trek fans, this is the Mr. Spock chord, the Vulcan greeting, live long and prosper. This is one of the only chords on the guitar where the gap is between your 2nd and 3rd finger. And so if you remember, this is minor 7, 1st inversion, then you've got the Mr. Spock chord. And if you want to call it the Star Trek chord or the Vulcan chord or the Live Long and Prosper chord, any of those will do for me, I don't care. Minor 7, 2nd inversion, this is a pretty easy one to play. I don't have a particular name for this one. Or the 3rd inversion chord. Star Trek. Now we go to minor 7 flat 5, simply flat the 5th. Do you remember what we called this? It's the box chord. Minor 7 flat 5 root position is the box chord. Here's 1st inversion B flat minor 7. You might notice that the shape of this chord is the same as the sparkly chord from the top 4 strings. Aha! So as far as shapes go, if you really like that sparkly chord on the top 4 strings and you recognize the shape, you bring it over and you've got an inversion of minor 7 flat 5. This one, here's B flat minor 7, here's the 5th, flat the 5th, and we have now what I call the natural chord. Take your hand off the guitar and hold it very loosely in front of you. Put your hand back in that chord. The 4 fingers of your hand are the shape of that chord. See how easily that goes on there? Minor 7, flat 5, nothing particular special about that shape. Natural, the shape of the sparkly chord, the box chord. So that gives you some of the shapes of these. Now that you are playing these as major 7s, dominant 7s, minor 7s, and minor 7 flat 5s, I also want you to think a little bit about the movement of these and the fact that at some point we can connect these up with passing tones. Don't worry too much about this right now because we will discuss this later, but I want you to be aware that we are not just playing chords anymore. We're now starting to think about playing chords as melodic entities, thinking of them not just this way, but now thinking of them this way as well.